Welcome to another edition of Tim's Vinyl Confessions. I'm Tim Derling. Thank you for tuning in yet again. This is an episode I promised for a little while, a few weeks now. I reviewed The Astonishing, the latest Dream Theater album, and I said that there would be a special TVC where I go through my Dream Theater collection, and this is it. Little backstory with me with Dream Theater. I remember hearing about them when they first came out in 1989, when they came out with their first album. Some of you may remember listening to the Metal Shop syndicated radio program for hard rock and metal, and I certainly remember listening to that late Sunday nights and interviews and songs that I'd never heard before by different artists, and that's where I first heard about Dream Theater. Didn't latch on to them then, and it was a few years later, even though I'd heard of them and the albums that they were doing. It was probably 1996 before someone introduced me to their music. As someone who was a longtime fan of, this is going to sound funny, but the hair metal scene or the more melodic rock scene that was sort of being thrust by the wayside rapidly with the advent of grunge, which I was not a fan of at all. I was really sort of looking for a newer band that was had a melodic sensibility and that I could sort of get behind. And also the fact that not only was I into the melodic rock, I was also a huge Rush fan. Someone said, "You would probably like Dream Theater." Lent me a couple albums. I listened to them, of course. It was, wow, like why didn't I latch onto these guys sooner? So became a pretty big fan, and then I've just followed along ever since. I've had periods where I don't listen to them as much, but I think that's pretty normal for most bands. And now that they have a new album out, I've kind of been digging into their catalog a little bit more. So I thought it was about time I did a TVC episode. There's a little bit of differences in formats here, which we'll go over. So this is my Dream Theater collection, Tim's Vinyl Confessions. Most of these are CDs, of course. This is the first Dream Theater album, When Dream and Day Unite. This came out in 1989. This was not the easiest thing for me to track down. This was originally released on Mechanic Records, which was distributed by MCA. It was a smaller sort of boutique label that was supposed to be set up to specialize in hard rock and metal. The only other artists I can think of that were on Mechanic Records were Bang Tango, if you remember them, and also the Canadian band Voivod. Dream Theater's first album was on Mechanic. Didn't turn out all that well, the deal that is. So the version that I got, that I ended up getting in 1998, is, it says MCA on it, but it's actually distributed by MCA. It's actually put up by One Way Records, which is a label that specializes in reissues of albums, not unlike Rock Candy or Wounded Bird. I have a couple of Sammy Hagar albums that One Way Records distributed through EMI. So you can see the MCA logo on there, but you'll also see that red One Way Records logo. This lineup was different. It was, of course, Mike Portnoy on drums, John Mayong on bass, John Petrucci on guitar. Those are the three founders of Dream Theater. On keyboards is Kevin Moore, and the singer, and it's the only album he appears on, is Charlie Dominici. And this is, for a first album, there's nothing to be embarrassed of. I don't think the group plays a lot of songs from this album, although I know they have done an anniversary concert to it. This album was produced, this is what the one-way version CD looks like, you can see that. This version, or this album was produced by Terry Date, who became a very big producer in the 90s, working with not only the likes of Soundgarden, but also Pantera. And he produced this first album. Also, there's a picture of the band. That's about as glammy as Dream Theater got, obviously, not a glam band. And so there was a couple of years of inactivity. They got out of their deal with Mechanic, and then they were signed to Atco, which is a division of Atlantic Records. And this is where things really started to happen for Dream Theater. Charlie Dominici was replaced as vocalist by a Canadian, James Labrie, who used to be in a band called Winter Rose. He also, it was never any recordings done, but he also was in a band I love, Coney Hatch, very, very, very briefly at the end of their career, like 1986. No recordings were made. This is doing after Carl Dixon left. So it's an interesting footnote for Canadian rock fans for sure. But the album that changed everything for Dream Theater, their 2112, as it were. I'm throwing Rush comparisons around here a lot because to me they sort of embody the spirit of a band like Rush, but into the 90s and beyond. though they're not copycats by any stretch. If someone has one Dream Theater album, it's this one. It's Images and Words. This came out in 1992. This album is the only Dream Theater album, to my knowledge, that's actually gone gold. So it sold 500,000 copies, at least back then. It's probably sold more since then. This is a Canadian issue on Columbia House. So this is the band as of 1992. And this album, of course, contained again, the one song people would know by Dream Theater, if they know one song, is Pull Me Under. That song was a number 10 mainstream rock hit on Billboard, so it's the song that they're most well known for. I guess, again, to belabor the point, if we're going to put it into Rush context, it's their Tom Sawyer. So that's a typical, that sort of heart with the thorns on it is used a lot, especially around this time. So inside the CD, we have sort of band photos, and of course we have all the lyrics and credits. So if you're going to start with Dream Theater, if you're curious about them, if you're going to start out with an actual album, I'd start with Images and Words, certainly. So the next thing to come out from Dream Theater came out in 1993, and it's a live EP. Again, recognize that logo there, the heart logo. Live at the Marquee, of course, the famous Marquee Club in England. This came out on the WIA International, although it does have an Atco logo on it. This is obviously recorded on the Images and Words tour. Now, being a super music geek and looking into things the way I do, even though this was an import, if you look at the catalog number, which you probably can't see there, but it's in the 92,000 series, which so was Images and Words. I'm wondering if this album didn't come very, very close to seeing domestic release, but at the last minute it didn't. Obviously there's songs here from mostly Images and Words. They do have Fortune and Lies and Eats Jam, I don't know if I'm saying that, from their first album, and a couple of improvisations on here as well, which they're legendary for. So it's Live at the Marquee. So this wasn't their official follow-up to Images and Words. The official follow-up to Images and Words came in '94. This is Awake, and this is another Canadian Columbia House issue. This was the first Dream Theater album to hit the top 40. It's the last Dream Theater album to feature keyboard player Kevin Moore. He left immediately after this album came out. Shot of the group. If you've ever seen the video to the song Live from this album, it's looks very much like this. I think it was probably shot and taken at the same time. Shot of the band in the studio here. And obviously lyrics and credits. And though I don't have a lot of variety in terms of formats in Dream Theater, I actually do have Awake on cassette. This is another Canadian Columbia House issue. Picked this up just because I wanted some Dream Theater on cassette. So there you go. Now, here's the thing with this album, and I didn't look into this prior. This album is missing a song. It's missing the song Scarred. So the song Scarred does not appear on the cassette. It's only on the CD and I suppose any vinyl issues. There's the cassette itself and the same stuff that was in the CD. It's Awake on cassette. Next up, another EP and another live offering from Dream Theater. It's called an EP, but it's a full-length album, but there's a reason if they call it an EP. It's actually a very enjoyable collection. Came out in 1995, called A Change of Seasons. I love the artwork where it's got the kid playing on the beach in the wintertime. You'll see the reverse of this when I take the booklet out. Another Canadian Columbia House issue. And by this time, they have a keyboard player named Derek Sherinian. Derek Sherinian had been a sort of a session guy, an offstage keyboard player with the likes of Kiss and Alice Cooper. And he wasn't in Dream Theater long, but he was in it during this period. So here's the reverse image. So you've got a guy in a winter coat on the beach in the middle of summer. And there's the CD itself. The reason that this is called an EP is because There's only one new song on it. Now granted, it's 23 minutes long, and it's the song A Change of Seasons, which was originally written during the Images and Words session, and they just put it down here. The rest of it, there are 4 more tracks on here, and they're all covers, and they're incredibly well done covers. Dream Theater, obviously writes great original material, but they're known for their cover versions. They do Elton John, Funeral for a Friend, which is an instrumental which leads into the song Love Lies Bleeding. That's excellent. A song that I love, a band that I love, Deep Purple. They do a great version of Perfect Strangers. There's a Led Zeppelin medley. If you're a Zeppelin fan, they do the Rover, Achilles' Last Stand, and the song remains the same, goes into each other. But the really fun thing to listen to, and I've introduced people to Dream Theater through this because of its familiarity, they call it the Big Medley, and it's 6 songs put together seamlessly. So it starts off with In the Flesh by Pink Floyd, Carry On Wayward Son by Kansas, Bohemian Rhapsody, of course, Queen, Lovin' Touchin' Squeezin' by Journey, which might surprise some of you, a song called Cruise Control, which was originally done by the Dixie Dregs, and then they end off with a snippet of Turn It On Again by Genesis, and it's just a flawless, seamless transition into all those songs. So inside the CD booklet itself, you've got the lyrics to the one new song, Change of Seasons, and some of the credits, and another band photo. And this, too, is one that I have on cassette. Now, they're Columbia House. They were getting rid of some of their cassettes, so I thought I'd better get them before they're not available. I'm glad I did. Would like to get more Dream Theater cassettes, but they're not a band that you see very often in this form. And unlike Awake, everything that was on this album is here. It's intact. And the same material, the same pictures that are inside the CD. It's a Change of Season. So there were, their label, Atco Records, got absorbed into East West Records, and the label was in a little bit of limbo at this point. So eventually it changed from Atlantic to Elektra Distribution. In the middle of all this, they kind of were frozen in recording. When they finally came out with another album, it was in late '97. So this is actually the first album that I bought as a fan, the first new Dream Theater album. This is Falling Into Infinity. And if you know anything about classic rock album design, you know who I mean by Hypnosis. Storm Thorgerson, think of the Pink Floyd album covers. He designed this album cover. Now this is an American issue of Falling Into Infinity. This album is not one that's generally well looked upon by longtime fans, from what I've read. I really like the album. I think I understand there's probably one main bone of contention with this album, which I'll get into. So there's the back cover, Falling Into Infinity. Binoculars looking at each other. I think the reason this album is looked upon sort of negatively, even by the band themselves, is the band was sort of under some pressure to be more commercial, which is a stupid idea, but for the record company's part. In the era of grunge, no one's going to buy a Dream Theater album that doesn't sound like Dream Theater. In the era of the music scene as it was, but some of the record companies were still clinging to an old model which says if you get an outside writer, you might get on the radio. And so I was rather surprised at the second song in here, a song called You Not Me, which was co-written by John Petrucci, Dream Theater's guitar player, and Desmond Child. Now, look, separating the whole Dream Theater aspect, Desmond Child's name appears on many of my all-time favorite songs. Songs by Bon Jovi, Aerosmith, Alice Cooper. He was the late 80s song doctor. He was the go-to guy. He was like the American Mutt Lange. And so he had the ability to, I don't want to say soften a band's sound, but put hooks in the songs that would get them on the radio. And it worked, depending on the type of band. Dream Theater is not that type of band. And of course it didn't work. And I think there was a lot of tension. I think that there was a very good chance that the band might have broken up at that point. Fortunately, they didn't. They regrouped. Another thing about Falling Into Infinity, I do have one piece of Dream Theater vinyl. It's Falling Into Infinity. This came out in '97, obviously originally, but this is a 2014 reissue put up by a company called Enjoy the Ride, although it is licensed from Atlantic Records. So I'm not opening this, but I do like this album a lot, and probably will be more Dream Theater vinyl in the future, but for now, this is what I've got for DT vinyl. So, okay, band goes on tour for Falling into Infinity, and then in 1998, a double live CD was released called Once in a Lifetime. This was, I like this, I love this cover. It opens up into like a coliseum on this guy's head. I think this is another Hypnosis album artwork. This is a Canadian issue. I bought this new, and a ton of songs on it, covering all aspects of their career. And something that they also do, even if they don't do all-out covers, there's a couple things that I heard for the first time on here. At the end of the song, Take the Time, all of a sudden they go into the end solo from Freebird by Lynyrd Skynyrd. You wouldn't think a prog band would sound okay doing a southern rock classic like that. They do. It sounds really good. And in the song Peruvian Skies, they bust into the riff from Metallica's Enter Sandman. So just adept. They're just like musicians that can change things on the drop of a hat. And this is still the lineup that Derek Sherinian was into, too, although that was about to change. So there's what the CDs look like. It's purple and blue. Pictures of the band inside it from being on tour. Credits. So at that point, they basically went to their label and kind of gave them an ultimatum. It says, we're not compromising, we're not using outside writers, we're not softening our sound, we're going to do an album that we want. And what they came up with was kind of an album that changed the course of their career. Again, if you know the story of Rush, it's kind of like 2112, although that was only their fourth album. This was kind of the same thing. They were under a tremendous amount of pressure to be more commercial, to sell more albums. They ended up doing a concept album, and it kind of put them on the path they've kind of stayed on. They've got their fan base, and that fan base is loyal, and obviously they've retained their artistic control, but they've also been able to do well on a certain commercial level. So this is the album that came out of that. This came out in 1999. This is Scenes from a Memory. So this is Dream Theater's sort of, I don't want to say it's a comeback album, but it sort of put them back on their track, the track that they wanted to be on. And it's a single disc concept album. Won't really bother getting into the story too much, because the main thing is the music is excellent on this. Music is just excellent on this. This is also the first Dream Theater album. Derek Sherinian had left, and he was replaced by Jordan Rudess, and Jordan has been with the group ever since. So it's broken up into Act 1 and Act 2. Find somewhere where this isn't. There we go. I'll be honest with you, I struggle with lighting on these shows sometimes. And this is certainly not the last time that Dream Theater would do a concept album. This bit here, this kind of reminds me of Alice Cooper's Lace and Whiskey. That's just quickly, if you're not an Alice Cooper fan, it won't mean anything to you. So obviously they toured for this album, and they're getting into a cycle almost here where they put out a live album almost after each studio album. Now, I don't have all of their live albums, and I don't have any of their DVDs. It's good stuff. I just don't have any of it. So 2001, this came out. This is Live Scenes from New York. This is a 3-disc set, and it primarily, it starts off with them doing the Scenes from a Memory album, and then it's kind of a mix of, older songs. Now, what's interesting about this album cover, this is not the original album cover that came out. If I'm not mistaken, I think this album came out on September 11, 2001. And it had a picture of, you can look it up, I'm not going to show it here, but it actually had a picture of the sort of the heart logo that they use, and it had a silhouette of the Twin Towers burning in the background. Obviously that got pulled. That would just be bad taste. Never mind the fact that this is primarily a New York-based band. It just doesn't matter in the interest of good taste. I don't care that came out and I didn't get it when it first came out. I just don't care about that. It might have come out a week before 9/11. I'm not sure, but it was close. And it got changed to the cover you see here, which is fine. That's the back cover. This is the first digipack. I actually hate digipacks, but here it is. In 2002, next Dream Theater album came out, another double album. This time it's a double concept album, or at least the second half it is. This is 6 Degrees of Inner Turbulence. And this is the first album that began Mike Portnoy's suite that he wrote about his alcoholism. He was actually very upfront and very, very, very vocal about it, which is pretty brave. So there are songs scattered throughout the next few albums that deal with this. There's a lot of good stuff on this. A lot of it's really heavy. So 2 discs. Thankfully came in a regular double CD package, not a digipack. Again, same lineup. Next up, pretty prolific band. Not quite an album a year or every 2 years, but not too far. The closest of any contemporary band I can think of. 2003, they came up with this album. This is Train of Thought. This is possibly the heaviest Dream Theater album, the most metal album, and I think that was by design. They just wanted to do an album that was just aggressive and heavy from start to finish. A lot of great songs on here. A lot of great songs on here. This is actually an enhanced CD. It's a Canadian version that I've got. Always lots of interesting imagery on the inside of their albums. And the lyrics to all the songs. So, sometime between 2003 and 2005, their record label reverts to Atlantic, which is kind of where they started, but just for one album. This is Octavarium. Came out in 2005. Now let me do a quick check. 1, 2, 3. Yeah, okay. Octavarium is their 8th full-length album, so it makes sense. The funny thing is that this album came out around the same time that AC/DC's DVD set Family Jewels came out. Yes, it's called Family Jewels. It's got the same sort of pendulum thing on it. Coincidences in there. This is actually a Canadian Columbia House version. One of the newest things I got from Columbia House, because it got so that a lot of the bands that I liked were putting albums out on smaller labels, and Columbia House would not get them, and their selection was getting really bad. So I kind of brought an end to that. Now this has one of those CD booklets that's a little hard to get to without bending the album cover. Oh, look at that, I just did it just to get it out. Just for you people. They tend to be ones I don't get into that much for that reason. Again, strange imagery inside these albums. Matter of fact, let me just follow up on a theory here about this. Yeah, that's what I thought. So this has all the hallmarks of a Hugh Syme album, designed album cover, and it was designed by Hugh Syme and Mike Portnoy. So next up, 2006 marked the 20th anniversary of Dream Theater as a band after forming in 1986 under the name Majesty. So they marked that by playing some very special shows at no less than Radio City Music Hall, and it was recorded for another live album. This one was quite special. This came out in 2006 on Rhino Records. It's called Score, and there's a few reasons for that. They have an orchestra backing them up, the Octavarium Orchestra to be exact, but also score is an ancient term referring to 20 years. Now, of course, I didn't pick up on that for many years. I feel like I should have. And there's something here from all the Dream Theater albums. They go all the way back to the first album for something like Afterlife, and a lot of stuff from Octavarium. Good mix of old and new on here, including a couple of songs that had never appeared officially on a Dream Theater album, but fans had known about them, you know, diehard fans had known about them. It was called Another One, W-O-N, and also Raise the Knife. So inside, this is a 3-disc set. Digipack packaging is just so deathly afraid of these CDs falling out. So, yeah, so that's Score, entertaining package. This version that I have is an American version. And so there was actually, I never understood that, why they put advertisements for the actual product you just bought inside there. I guess they want you to buy the DVD. and some other Dream Theater DVDs that are available. Many, many more since then, of course. 2007, one of my favorite Dream Theater albums. It might actually be my favorite. I love this album. Systematic Chaos. This comes in a slipcase. It's a Canadian version. This was the first Dream Theater album to come out on Roadrunner Records after they switched labels. This is what the back of this looks like. This comes with a bonus DVD. It talks about the making of the album. This, like Train of Thought, is a pretty heavy album as well, but very melodic, and I just really, really like it. This is what the album proper looks like out of the slipcase. And the back cover. Side. Really thick CD booklet. I don't know if you could tell by that. That's very, very thick CD booklet. There's the back cover. Systematic Chaos was made to describe how the band feel about what their sound is. Now, interestingly enough, here comes a continuation of the Octavarium theme with the pendulum. Well, there's a name for those, and I can't think of what it is. Not quite a concept album, but it kind of is. There's sort of an overall theme, war theme going through it, but not strictly. It's kind of bookended by a song called In the Presence of My Enemies. In the Presence of Enemies. There's Prophets of War, Ministry of Lost Souls. One of their heaviest songs on there ever, The Dark Eternal Night, which is really cool. And then the DVD that comes with this kind of puts everything, it's really amusing to watch. So at this point, they've been a pretty proactive, or a pretty prolific band, but there has been no compilation that came out. But of course, what record companies do when a band changes labels is they do just that. So Atlantic, in association with Rhino Records, put out the very first Dream Theater compilation. It came out in 2008, and I love the title of this. It shows the band's sense of humor. This is called Dream Theater's Greatest Hit, and 21 other pretty cool songs. That's a reference to the fact that Pull Me Under was a top 10 mainstream rock hit, and they've actually had they've had other songs that hit the mainstream rock charts. I think Take the Time did, Lie, Burning My Soul, and I almost think You Not Me. But that's been it for charting singles for Dream Theater. So this is broken up into two sides: the dark side and the light side. The dark side, of course, it features the heavy songs like Lie and As I Am, The Root of All Evil, and the light side contains like Another Day. Some new things on here, or some selling points for the person that has everything else. Song To Live Forever, which was a B-side from the Images and Word sessions, and that actually dates back to their first album, appears here, and there are remixes to Pull Me Under and Another Day. And of course it's two CDs, but I'll just show you the booklet to this. Pretty extensive, there's an extensive write-up about the band in here. And it's done by, I think, the head of their fan club. I could be wrong about that. Rich Wilson, yeah, the author of Lifting Shadows, the authorized biography of Dream Theater, which I meant to get but didn't, and I don't think it's available anymore. An introduction by Mike Portnoy. Mike Portnoy is the drummer of the band, but he plays a pretty key role in everything that Dream Theater did up to this point. Not unlike Lars Ulrich from Metallica. He's a very hands-on guy and did a lot of the press. You'll see why that's so significant here in a bit. 2009 was the release of the next Dream Theater album, Black Clouds and Silver Linings. Now this version I have, let's see if you can see the sticker on here. It's 3 CD special edition. There was a lot of configurations that this came out in, and I got this version. And this again is on Roadrunner Records. So this disc 1 is the album proper, the album itself. Disc 2 is another covers disc, but these are ones done in studio. And as far as covering songs that I like, they do Stargazer by Rainbow, which I knew that song anyway, and a 3-piece Queen medley, Tenement Funster, Flick of the Wrist, and Lily of the Valley, which are as they appeared on the Sheer Heart Attack album, one right after another, and actually Mike Portnoy sings them, and it's quite good. Disc 3 is the album in instrumental form, so if you know someone that's that ambitious, wants to do a little Dream Theater karaoke, be my guest. So they each came in these individual single discs here. And if I want to reach for one, I never get the right one the first time, especially if I'm in the car. I just grab one. And of course, there's a booklet. The booklet is not sewn in, but it's attached to the album itself. Very, very Swedish death metal looking picture of the group here. Now, in 2010, something very, very shocking happened in the Dream Theater world, which I certainly didn't see coming. I don't think a lot of people did. Mike Portnoy left. One of the founding members and the mouthpiece of the group left, and he's never come back. And you all, if you're a Dream Theater fan, you know that story. He was replaced by Mike Mangini, who I knew from appearing on Extreme's Waiting for the Punchline album. So he's fully capable drummer, really, really good. But it was a big move, very, very huge move for Dream Theater. It was crazy. It's the last thing you'd ever expect. But the result of all that is the 2011 album, A Dramatic Turn of Events, aptly named, of course. This is a Canadian version, and this is a deluxe edition I have with a bonus DVD, which actually includes the drummer auditions to replace Mike Portnoy. Again, obviously on Roadrunner Records, been their label since. Once again, we have the CD booklet is part of the whole album package. And, you know, the surprising thing is that all of these albums have been quite consistently good, you know. They've been very prolific. You know, some of the classic rock bands, I know these guys came out in '89, but you say a band like Extreme or Skid Row that came out the same year, they're hard to get anything to show for it. It's not a criticism, it's just an observation. These guys just keep coming up with stuff. Not to mention the fact that in between all of these, there's generally a live album. So, I've kind of a bit of touch of OCD. So when a band comes out with a self-titled album that isn't their first album, it kind of gives me the fits. I'm like, why would you do that? If you're not going to call your first album after yourselves, why would you do it? But in 2013, Dream Theater did just that. They put out their very first self-titled album. And I didn't get the deluxe edition this time. This is just the regular edition. But again, another really good album. So, Roadrunner again. So to remove, take the booklet out. So there's the better look at the front cover. Just simple. The Dream Theater logo. By the way, Dream Theater were originally called Majesty. And all the letters that make up Majesty apparently are in this logo. I've never tried to draw it, but that's the story behind it. Graphics inside that don't look all that different from what will follow, actually. Always lots of cool imagery in their albums along to go with the music. And there's a card that comes with this album that advertises one of their many live albums, Live at Luna Park, which hadn't come out yet at that point, but it was advertising that it was coming out. And finally, an album I don't really think I need to go with a great in-depth with here because I've already done a review of it. This is, of course, The Astonishing, which I'm still enjoying listening to. Their latest album came out in 2016. So that's my Dream Theater collection. Great band, and glad to be able to share my collection with you. Wish I had some more of their vinyl, but who knows, that might change. Thanks for watching this edition of Tim's Vinyl Confessions.